Well, if it isn't Eggman! Huh.
Yep, that's me. You're probably wondering how I ended up in this situation. It all started back when I was born. My mother, Ruth Franklin, was around the Bikini Atoll in 1946, and the nuclear fallout made her infertile. My father, Harold Robotnik, didn't want to keep her trying to conceive, but she was insistent. Eventually, she did manage to bear a child. She didn't actually get to see me. She died during the birthing process. My father was distant from me. He didn't want to raise a child because he wanted to focus on science. I think he also blamed me for killing her. And that never really left how he talked to me. It wasn't until later that I tried to get closer to him by learning science and trying to be of use to him. In the second grade, I got into the science fair to impress my father. He hated my idea of animal-powered electricity and expressed doubts of it fully functioning a motor. However, the judges loved the use of my own pet hamster to power a simple motor and commended my advanced understanding of electronics. It was then when my father finally started to notice my potential. He rewarded me with a trip to the local carnival. The local carnival was, for its time, truly remarkable. The hard sheet music organ, the basic roller coaster, the teacup ride. It was the most fun I have ever had in my life. It ingrained in me a splendor and desire to create my own amusement park. And it's been my dream ever since. I never wanted to leave. And when I finally had to, I begged my father for us to return. He promised me that we would go back. We never got that chance. I immediately dove into designing machines that were based on moving parts, safe contraptions for excitement, and even early animatronics. My father saw my sketches and thought it was a waste of my true potential. He discouraged me from continuing it. I didn't want to lose the ground I made with my father, so I stored the sketches away on the shelf. During the summer after the science fair, my father took me to see my grandfather, Gerald Robotnik. He was currently working in New Mexico for the government. We had to sign some non-disclosure agreements, but we were allowed into the facilities. It is an understatement to say that Gerald was a genius. He was excited to show me his glories, such as limb renewal based on amphibian processes, unearthing an ancient robot, and his blueprints of his recently launched space colony Ark. His thesis on the lost fourth great civilization was way beyond my comprehension, but it is a wonderful piece of historical nonfiction. I was amazed and filled with renewed vigor for mechanical engineering that could benefit all of humanity, just like my grandfather. Gerald recounted to me his encounter many years ago with otherworldly beings. He witnessed a large, metallic ship crash landing near the base. The being was able to communicate with the scientists and military, and they began a mutualistic relationship. The alien shared some information with the government, and they, in turn, did all they could to keep it alive in our harsh environment. It perished shortly afterward, but not before it confided in Gerald the location of another being. The alien believed they would gain much from each other. The government blacked out all files pertaining to this incident and almost let it slip into the public's grasp. Gerald managed to contact the other being, and he teamed up with it on a secret project involving the alien's technology with Gerald's advancements in medical engineering. They utilized 7 unique gemstones as a power source, which, at the time, sounded like complete fiction to me. I was very young at the time, and I didn't realize what was going on until I was older. We left New Mexico, and I immediately started brainstorming ideas using my father's works as inspiration. My father was back to approving of the direction I would go as I returned to school. I I got to see my grandfather that winter when he invited himself and my cousin Maria over for Christmas. He gifted me a pure, white puppy, with whom I immediately fell in love. Its fur was gentle and smooth, and I called him Eggy. I played with Eggy long into the evening, and I nearly missed the conversation my grandfather was having with my father. Gerald told us how Maria had contracted a serious condition that put her health in jeopardy, which I would later understand is why he brought her to see us. He told my dad of the team that would be on the Ark, and how he'd be going up there with Maria to work on a cure. Harold ridiculed and chastised my grandfather's beliefs in those 7 gemstones, calling them homeopathic garbage rocks, and spitting on geology. Harold went on a long spiel about how technology couldn't save anyone. I'll never forget, he said, "Technology couldn't save my wife. What makes you think it can save your granddaughter?" The argument got very heated, and it ended with my grandfather standing up, saying his last goodbyes to me and Eggy, and leaving with Maria. I was sure I'd never see them again. I didn't understand the deep background behind the argument, but I felt my dad had offended Gerald for no reason. I yelled at him for making him send my grandfather away, and he went into a rage. He screamed about how geology is a useless science, and how it will never contribute anything to forwarding progress. He threw several fragile items at the walls during the tirade, and warned me to never pursue a stupid legend about some colored rocks. I hid in my room for the rest of the week. In order to keep a decent relationship with my father, I kept making several trinkets and doodads to keep his favor. I withheld myself from my true passions just to be close to him. I would later understand just how insecure he was. It wasn't long until my dad became more reclusive and distant. I tried to show him my latest creations, but he didn't have any time for it, and spent his evenings locked in the garage. I longed for his sealed-away attention. I didn't know how much I would regret it until it came back to me. I came back from school to be greeted by his long-gone, warm greeting to me. I could immediately tell he was back, and I rushed to his arms. He had a spark in his eye, which I hadn't seen in my memory. He whispered, "Hey, let's go to the carnival." My eyes opened like window blinds on a bright spring morning. I hurriedly got in the car, and we took off to the highway to reach the land of my dreams. He had a wide smile on his face the entire way, and I didn't think to question it. I was just happy to have him back. My thoughts were occupied by the new rides I heard other kids talking about, which I would try first. I still feel the giddiness of that exact moment. My father hit the highway at a decent pace. I don't remember going this fast before, but I enjoyed the thrill, as if it were a roller coaster. The adrenaline, the flushing of my face, the wind on my skin, it was all there. That's when the car started to rapidly decelerate. My father's lofty demeanor was replaced by a confused, shocked countenance. He swore several times and frantically worked on troubleshooting the problem. He pulled over to the side and we came to a halt. We both got out and he popped the hood. He waved away the rising steam as he tried to inspect the malfunctioning engine. He found the source of the problem, and as he did, he told me to stay back. My suspicions were too great to be held back, and I watched as he opened a cylinder near the engine. Inside the cylinder was a pool of crimson liquid with a floating white patch of fluff. I watched as my father inserted a gloved hand and lifted the lump by its scruff, revealing a limp head of a poor pup. I instantly knew the face and screamed in a blind frenzy. I wailed and plummeted my dad's leg to no avail. Tears burst from my squinted eyes as I learned how to mourn. His hands shook as he held me back, maybe from fear of the situation. I cried for what felt like the whole evening, until he managed to flag down a bus. The ride home was blurred. I can't remember what happened on the bus. Anything he said to me to cheer me up was muffled and deafened by my horror. I struggled to cope with why he did such a thing to my dearly loved Eggie. I'll never be able to pet that face again. Never be unconditionally greeted with such a warm smile. Never be loved again. My heart tore and ripped itself asunder that day, and it steered itself against affections for things that are ultimately stolen from us. When we got home, he felt he could finally explain himself. He said he was inspired by my science fair project and wanted to tweak and amplify the power produced. He worked on the prototype for a while and came up with a working model. The power stemmed from the animal's blood and worked with a tested squirrel to start the car. It was so certain it would work with anything and keep it going. What went wrong was the demand for blood, as the machine requires more power. The circulation must have been too fast for the arteries and veins to handle, and they probably burst inside of it. As I imagined Eggie dying from blood flooding its insides, he added, "You were what inspired me, Ivo, and the intentions were noble. So it's really on you for such a flawed concept." I shook in righteous indignation at such a fool. His words were evasive as he tried to hide from failure. This pathetic excuse for a person hurt my eyes to look at. So I said nothing and locked myself in my room. Harold's love was not worth my effort. I abandoned science and just got by with my education. My education was miserable, and I found no joy in any pursuit. Arts were without emotion. The core curriculum was a joke, and I didn't care for anything. Harold turned to the bottle and never let the sauce run dry. It was toward the end of high school that he began to show signs of true illness. I imagine it was his liver finally catching up with him. I believe the mortician identified the cirrhosis. The last conversation I had with the waste was the fall of 1970. It had me at my usual expressionless face, and him yelling at me about how it was my fault my mother had died. I watched as he collapsed from exhaustion and as the light left his eyes. His breathing was shallow, and I saw the last beat of his heart as he came to a new stillness. His yellowed eyeballs grew cloudier, and I imagined his insides leaking inside of him. I felt a sense of calm as justice was finally administered to Harold. I sat down on the floor and stared up into the night sky for about an hour before I called for an ambulance. I remember sleeping well that night and waking up refreshed. I still had to finish high school, so I forged checks in Harold's name and withdrew from his account. I managed to keep the rent and food for a while. The money wasn't a huge surplus. The constant boozing he did drained the account quite a bit. I wasn't able to make rent for a couple months. Even considering the circumstances, the loan officers repossessed the property. I managed to take my things with me, but I was ultimately homeless. I tried to go to school for a while, but I got arrested for loitering and trespassing several times. I wasn't able to graduate. I bounced around from place to place, living off people's goodwill. I ate disgusting, cheap items just to survive. I never had enough to afford getting a decent change of clothes or making a job application for myself. I was just about at the end of my rope 6 months into it. Fortune, somehow, managed to reach out to me with a bohemian hand. A group of traveling hippies took me into their fold and cared for me. There was warm food, warm blankets, and warm bodies that loved each other for no other reason but to love. This roaming, ever-growing group took out some of the screws, stealing my heart. I was distant at first, since I couldn't really be sure if I could trust them, or just being close to them. The first to get me to open up named herself Cloverfield. She was a bit older than me, and she looked like she had early-onset Parkinson's. She was still caring, and held me close when I would shiver at night. I grew truly fond of her, and I simply loved her. She got me to tell her my past and all the pain attached to it. There was no judgment, only a warm, tight embrace at the end. I felt so liberated, so free. I wanted to start anew. She encouraged me to reinvent myself. I took on the title of the Walrus, and I felt a vigor surge through me. It was the summer of 1971 when I lost my virginity to Clover in the back of the group's Volkswagen Transporter. 1971's autumn was a bit more hectic. After a long summer of frolicking, concerts, and parties, we went to the post office to get our bi-monthly mail visit. There was nothing for me, but Timmy Aquarius shook as he read a single letter. He had been drafted. We told him we'd just ignore it and hike up to Canada, but he freaked about being jailed and getting thrown into the Vietnamese jungles. The whole group felt the unease. I felt at a loss as to how to help him. Something compelled me to stand up, take his letter, and tell him I was going instead. The whole group didn't understand. And I explained that since we were fairly similar in appearance, that I'd managed to pass as him. I took his ID against the group's cries for me to stop. I was hardened and resolved in the altruistic deed. I thanked the group one last time as I headed off to the nearest bus stop. I dared not look back as I left their ranks and joined the man. I had no idea what I was doing. I'd never fought anyone. I'd never shot a gun. My actions were so illogical, but they somehow felt right. Just as I thought, I passed the impersonation of Timmy, and I was soon headed to basic training. The drill period was brief because they were desperate for bodies on the front lines. Overall, basic training wasn't bad. I didn't mind the shaved head. My hippie hair was kind of oily. However, I did find the concept of unarmored infantry somewhat backwards. But I was a dog for the government. The harsh jungles of Vietnam were a madhouse. Our platoons ran for our lives, living in constant fear of ambushes and night battles. We managed to liberate a village, but they somehow convinced the natives to sell us out to them. The Charlies set fire to the houses while we were inside them, and we scrambled to regroup and survive. I got pinned down behind one of the flaming houses, and I was forced to use the charred, still aflame body of a dead comrade as a distraction. I grabbed his searing body with my hands and tossed him to my left as I dashed off to the right. They insulted him more by riddling his body with rounds. Only me and 2 others lived through that night. We hiked through the jungles until we met with an arriving platoon that brought us in with them. I didn't want to go back, but I didn't really have a choice. The blood was pounding in my ears, and I wasn't going to not go back alive. I only slept 7 hours in my new 14-day campaign. My night watches were always alert and kept our entire group alive. I could no longer tell people in need of liberation from foe. I often kept a knife pinned to the throat of each person we'd keep. My suspicions were right 80% of the time, and I confirmed my bias as I found each in talks with the enemy, and popped both of them. We didn't shower or bathe for the entire campaign, and I came back caked in blood and burns. The government didn't know how to handle people coming back from war. Their advice was to shake it off and gradually come back, so here's some money and go away. There is no gradual course when you've been scarred for life. I couldn't hold the handles of my luggage without causing my hands to writhe in pain. I eventually bought some gloves as a barrier from the wounds, and they worked until the nerves died. I bought a motorcycle and tried to reach out to the hippie group I came from, but they never responded to my letters, and they never were at their usual locations. I gave up and lived in an apartment on a VFW stipend. One day, when I went to get groceries, I saw a burst of flame come from the deli section. I dashed in, grabbed the worker, and threw them down to the ground with me as I tried to hide us from the incoming flashpoint. The worker freaked and hit me to release them. I didn't realize they were just setting up the barbecue. I spent days sitting in my living room in fear. I was struggling to cope with the indignity of the whole ordeal. How can you just send frail organisms out to fight each other? Has humanity really evolved only to reduce themselves to low beasts? It's not even for food. It's because a bigger beast commanded you to hunt a rival pack. Disgusting. All of it. I prayed for a way to help the poor fools damned to go out and either not come back or return broken. It wasn't fair. Then it hit me. Could you accomplish the same thing without loss of life? What would be the way to protect that which we held most sacred? The obvious solution is armor. The medieval period had even that basic knowledge. Hell, there had to be a way to be able to guarantee a safe send-out and a safe return. However, I was scared by the idea. If I wanted to do anything to help anyone, I'd have to go back to that which I discarded long ago. Science. I wasn't entirely committed to the idea. It wasn't until I was going through my mail and reading the paper that my drive kicked in. In the fallout of the tragedy that was Vietnam, the government finally decided to release several documents about blacklisted projects to the public to earn their favor again. One of the projects caught my eye, one involving Space Colony Ark. The actual briefing was mostly blacked, but the casualty list wasn't. Sorry. Maria Robotnik was among those listed as dead. She had died before any breakthrough could be made. The Guardian Units of Nations, a global PMC, was held responsible. What pieces of shit. I can only imagine what my grandfather felt about it. It was 3 weeks after that when a knock came to my door. 2 suited men asked if I was Ivo Robotnik. I cautiously said I was, and after they introduced themselves as government agents, they escorted me to their van. I wasn't told where I was going, but they assured me it wasn't an arrest. We arrived at a distant house with a large garage. I had no idea where I was. They marched me inside and instructed me to unlock the mechanism to Gerald Robotnik's lab. How should I know? I've never been here. And they want the projects? It was then I asked why. And they told me Gerald requested these items for his further research at a different, far-removed location. As I approached the door, I could see why they needed me. The door felt reinforced and maybe 6 inches thick. The door had a keyboard next to it, and it was obvious a password needed to be entered. I searched my brain until it ached. The password of a genius? It could be anything. He had his hand in so many things that anything could be a solution. I tried a couple of his project names and the name of the otherworldly beings he met, and none worked. What could this man's root be? Then it hit, all at once. What was the thing driving him more than anything? M-A-R-I-A. Maria. The door dinged and slid open. I couldn't believe it actually worked. The agents quickly poured in and began loading their 2 vans with the lab's contents. I had to caution them to be careful with the vats of liquid and the mechanical automata. These were all his things that were off the grid. I bet these guys didn't know what any of it did. I saw each piece and knew its exact purpose, each memory flooding back into my brain. I felt my face's expression crack a rusty smile. I was then taken with them to care for these objects. I was excited to see my grandfather's new lab. What could be better than the space colony he designed? My anticipation was quite giddy. Could it even be a utopia? Oh, what lofty dreams I imagined his new landscape to be. The truth revealed itself to me, and I was instantly both surprised and afraid of what was ahead. We were now on a boat headed for Prison Island. What is something you cherish? Can you hold it? Can you imagine it? Cradle it in your arms and your mind's eye. Let it feel your heartbeat. Let it know you care for it. Let it know you cherish it and would gladly sell the world for it. Now, actually be faced with that choice and sell the world for it. Now, after all that, it is stripped from you, and you are powerless against the force of it. Watch it break to shreds in front of you. Now, face the knowledge of never getting that back. Are you trembling? Has your worldview been shattered? Can you blame someone who had this happen for anything? This is the fate of my grandfather, Gerald Robotnik. He came back to Earth and had a fair life working on more government projects. It wasn't until he learned of Maria's fate that he snapped and was damned to this life on this secluded rock. As we brought in the plethora of equipment and projects, he paid us no mind as he paced back and forth. I tried to talk to him, but he never looked up nor stopped mumbling to himself. This was not the same man I knew from my childhood. This is not the same hero I aspired to be. Did he fall from grace? Or had grace abandoned the fallen? My God did not last long on Prison Island. He died not long after that visit. I spent at least several years confronted with me now, being truly alone, with nothing to live for. Family, friends, and the government had all been severed from my grasp. My depression finally let loose the horrible black cloud it was holding back. I didn't feel I had anywhere to escape to. For months on years did I eat nothing but garbage to appease my depression. Nothing tasted good. Nothing felt good. Nothing was right. I hated the sunlight filtering in through the blinds, but I couldn't motivate myself to close them more. Futility was my answer to everything. Working out? Futile. Learning something? Futile. Eating something other than trash? Futile. Going outside? Why bring about your PTSD, you idiot? Trying? Why bother? This was my life. Call it stars aligning, call it a spark of inspiration, call it whatever you want. One day, I had enough. I was tired of being tired. I slapped myself hard enough to bring blood to my mouth. Without so much as a word to myself, I grabbed my notes and my grandfather's notes I secretly took from his lab. And I started working. I designed ridiculous things that didn't work, countless ideas. My brain was everywhere at once. And eventually it focused in on my dream. An amusement park. The worst realization wasn't the scope or the design or the safety. The worst realization was the capital required for such a venture. I was desperate for quick solutions, and I knew lotteries wouldn't do it. I went to the library and rented several books on economics and business. That's when I knew I would have to risk the stock market. It's honestly fairly safe if you know what to look for in trends. I took out a loan and took the surplus from each VFW check and invested it in stocks. I traded like crazy. I got tired of the caffeine-driven hectic days. So I wrote a program that could track trends, analyze data, and automatically invest in something that would profit. It wasn't long until I'd amassed a small fortune to fund my ventures. I managed to acquire location after location. Land wasn't hard, but construction was harder. All the human hands I employed were slow and tired so easily. It took large machines just to lift things they couldn't. Then why even bother using them, I thought. Well, there's not really a reason. I could design people better than people. A mechanical exoskeleton was easy to conceptualize, but power was still an issue. Especially trying to remove the human component. A sudden fear burst into my chest. Would I have to tread in the bloodied waters of Harold's work? The fear shook me hard. How could I even entertain the thought of his work? It disgusted me. However, I did remember the image of his failed prototype. Things were in place, but his energy module was faulty. And the returns were failures too. He just couldn't get my idea. My idea. That's right. It was my idea from the start. Animals could power machines at their own pace. They'd be willing to do it too, if the reward system were in place and plenty of sustenance were available. It could work. The revelation sparked me to the sketchboard again. I designed machine after machine, each with a special purpose, and each with the same power source. Animals converting their kinetic energy through a wheel to a machine. I optimized the energy flows and allowed them to run on virtually nothing. And my land was quite near places of lush vegetation. So it all worked out. As long as the animals felt your unconditional love, they'd do anything for you. It took some work for me to get back to opening myself to furry critters, but with practice and time, I started to stitch my heart back onto my sleeve. My constructions and guard robots were put together through my sweat and blood. My first test park wasn't bad at all, and I even allowed slot machines to permit humans to give me more capital to invest and use. I continued my efforts to help the animal population, particularly strays and the easily preyed upon. The robot shells protected the animals from harm, but I refused the many government contracts for their deployment in war operations. With all these wonderful accolades, what could cause such calamity as this? My guess is a misunderstanding. I don't know where this blue anthropomorphic hedgehog came from, but I don't think he gets it. It sees my robots powered by my friends and smashes them to utter pieces in the name of freedom fighting, whatever that is. It doesn't see the value, the virtue in it. On a utilitarian level, I felt I must stop it, but I can't. I'm powerless against this foe? Is that the right word? You know, the people you have to feel the same drive, but you are destined to be perpendicular from them? I think this is that. So, this is where I'm at. What's left for me? Well, maybe I'll dig some more into my grandfather's research and finish some of the things he couldn't. Who knows? Maybe I'll even go on a quest to find those 7 magical gemstones. All I hope is that I don't fall into the same darkness my father, Harold Robotnik, did. Maybe I should up the defense on the animal's protective robotic exoskeletons. This way, the hedgehog entity that addresses me as Eggman and keeps assaulting my machinery will think twice about interfering. This is best for the environment, after all. This is best for my dream of having my own amusement park to come to fruition. The tentative title, Robotnik Land.